Yo, welcome to the Hoop Objective Podcast with your boy Armani. Yesterday we had some closeout games. One ended up being good, one ended up being uninteresting. But yeah, man, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So yesterday, we had Game 5, Bucks and Bulls in Milwaukee. The Bucks closed out the Bulls 116-100 on Giannis's 33 points and 9 rebounds. And DeMar had 11 points in the closeout game. It was a closeout game for the Bucks, but to potentially be getting eliminated and you to drop 11 points, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. But more than anything, what this series showed me is that, yes, the Bulls do have potential. They can become a championship contender. But the thing is, I don't think you can rely on DeMar as your first option to, go ahead and get you guys over the hump. Because every year that he's in the playoffs, he shows us that he's not as reliable as we think he is as a first or even a second option. And even LaVine, I don't know what happened to LaVine this series. This was his first playoff series, so I'll give him a little bit of slack for that. But when it comes to Zach LaVine, he didn't play well in this series, and I don't think he didn't even play yesterday. So, that doesn't look too good for the Bulls. The Bulls, they have potential, but they do gotta make some offseason moves. Last year, they did good with making the moves that they made. And in terms of getting the team better, getting the team back into the playoffs, at least getting them competing. But if the Bulls want to go further, than the first round in future years, they gotta get somebody. They gotta get someone else in there. They gotta get another piece or two in there. Another game that happened yesterday was another closeout game. Was the Warriors and Nuggets. Golden State played their Game 5 at home also. And the Warriors closed out the series 102-98 on Curry's 30 points and 5 assists. Then Jokic had 30 points, 19 rebounds, and 8 assists. What I got to say about that game was that, the Nuggets did fight. They fought Game 4 and Game 5. After going down 3-0, they didn't just lay down, which is something you can admire about Denver. Even though they did continue to fight, we all knew they were done, especially this game. They did have control for the first 3 quarters. I'm not going to lie. Denver had control for the first three quarters from Aaron Gordon being aggressive, using his athleticism to get into the paint and getting people in early foul trouble. And Jokic, I just want to say something about Jokic. I just want to mention something about Jokic. He is probably the most impactful big that I've ever watched live. He is the most impactful big that I've ever watched live for sure. Not in terms of, when I say big, Giannis is a big, but I don't mean Giannis isn't the most traditional big out there. The more traditional bigs are more like Joel Embiid or Jokic. Those guys are more traditional bigs, and even calling them traditional is a stretch. That's a stretch because the thing for example, with Jokic is the most dominant. He's the most dominant playmaker on the court. He's the most dominant, rebounder on the court off the boards, and he's always one of the most dominant, scorers on the court. Jokic, I don't see he doesn't have not one weakness. The only weakness you'll see in his game, which makes sense, is perimeter defense. But even though they got gentlemen swept in this series, bro, Jokic, he impressed me. He made such a big impact in this series and in each and every game that it's hard to not call him the MVP. Or if he wins it, if he ends up winning it this year, he's not my MVP personally. I think I'll give the edge to Giannis, but if he's the win MVP, no one can't say anything. If Jokic is a 2-time MVP, it makes sense. If you watch Jokic, you see why he would be a 2-time MVP, because of what he does, the impact he gives to the Nuggets and gives to that team and gives to all those guys. And he also gives the coaches more options when it comes to sets and, things of that nature, because he's so versatile. He's so versatile offensively and defensively. He's so versatile when it comes to he can shoot, he can post up, he got those hook shots, he got the mid range, he can shoot free throws. He's not a ball dominant guy. He can get he could get other people the ball. He's different. Jokic is different, and he shouldn't be getting any slander in the media or any slander on Twitter or whatever the case may be, because he has made such a big impact on Denver and on basketball in general that he deserves whatever good that comes to him. He deserves whatever awards or accolades that will come to him. But let's go ahead and get into the topics of today. And the first topic I want to get to is the super team era is over. The super team era is over, in my opinion. And this season started to show why the super team. This season, it didn't even start this year. I'm not even gonna say it started this year. We started to see indications of the super team era being over before this year, and this year honestly just influenced it even more. Let's say, and this year's prime examples, two prime examples are the finals favorites. The preseason final favorites were the Nets and the Lakers. And why? It's because those two teams have the most stars, most Hall of Fame names, they have all of that. They have everything that you would think a team should want or should need. But this year showed us that, with those teams, both of those teams underperforming this year, that talent isn't enough. You can't just have talent and all the superstars and expect to win because you have that. In the Lakers case, those stars didn't even end up fitting. Westbrook and AD and LeBron, they don't fit. LeBron and AD, as we can see from them winning their 2020 championship, did fit in a sense. But when you add Westbrook in there, it didn't make sense even when the season started. It never made sense for them three to be paired together. And the Lakers did it, which I can see why they would think this way, is that the more stars you put together, they'll figure it out. They figure it out. They've had the experiences, they've won, they've lost, they've won championships, whatever the case may be. They used all that to believe that they will figure it out. And even if they were to work, right? You can't discount injuries, and you can't just take away injuries. LeBron has been injury prone for the past, honestly, ever since he joined the Lakers. When he joined the Lakers, that's when he started becoming injury prone. AD has been injury prone all his career. AD gets hurt every single year, and we've seen him, have those times where when he falls, or whenever he gets a scare when he starts holding his leg or whatever the case may be, you start getting nervous because you're like, bro, AD, like, we know you're fragile, but damn, bro, you gotta stay on the court. You can't be getting hurt almost every single game. It literally feels like every time you watch AD, he gets hurt in some way, shape, or form. And that is something that the Lakers didn't take into account, is LeBron and AD getting hurt, which, bringing in Westbrook should have helped that. They should have helped that. Westbrook was supposed to, whenever LeBron's out or whenever AD is out, he's supposed to be able to be that star that can alleviate whatever they may lose. But here's the problem with Westbrook, is that Westbrook can bring what they wanted. If LeBron or AD gets hurt, Westbrook can bring it, but not in the best way not in a way that's most conducive to winning. He can do it in terms of he can get his stats. He will get his triple-double. Your team will be close. He can put your team in a close position to winning, but he can't consistently win or on the championship level playing the way he plays. So you got the stars not fitting. You got injuries. And then you got another thing that everyone discounts when it comes to putting a championship team or a roster together, for either the short term or the long term, is that you need the requisite role players to, be able to help your stars out whenever they're not on their best game. to be able to, get your team in a deeper position or a better position of winning. We've seen that with both teams. We've seen that with the Lakers and the Nets, so where they didn't have the role players that could, bring them, that can help them, that can help bring them to the promised land whenever their stars aren't playing, their best. We've seen it more with the Lakers than with the Nets because in the playoffs, at least we've seen Bruce Brown make appearances. We've seen Goran Dragic make appearances. We've seen Patty Mills make appearances. So, the Nets, it's not like they didn't have any role players. It's just that their role players were a little older and over the hill, and they couldn't really go get younger guys because they didn't have the space. You don't have the space to go get those guys because you got KD and Kyrie, and now you got Ben Simmons, and you're just not gonna have the space. Same with the Lakers. The Lakers didn't have the space because you paying Westbrook $47 million, you paying LeBron $42 million, you paying AD 38, 39 million. So the Lakers or the Nets in that sense will never have the space to go get good role players who still kind of sort of in their prime because they don't have the space. All they can go do is go get minimum guys that are 35 to 36 to 38, 39, whatever the case may be. So those three reasons are the main reasons why this super team thing is starting to not really be the best way of winning, is because you can't just throw stars together and expect them to fit. You got injuries. Injuries always play a part, and then you got to have the role players. And the anomaly to this super team thing were the Heat and the Warriors. The Heat, we went and we got LeBron, we got Chris Bosh, and then we brought in some guys, most of them on the vet minimum, to go ahead and try to help us win championships. And we ended up going to 4 straight and winning 2 of them, which honestly, a lot of people will still say we underachieved because y'all remember LeBron saying not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. He had some crazy expectations back in the day. But, we still ended up going to 4 finals and winning 2 of them. And then you got Golden State, who went to 5 finals. They went to 5 straight finals. They went to 2 without KD and 3 with KD. And when it comes to the Warriors, they won 3 out of 5. And, the first one that they lost was due to injuries and suspensions. And then, stars not playing up to their potential like Steph. And then the other one was 2019 when they played Toronto, was due to injuries. Y'all remember everyone got injured in that series. Clay, KD, everyone got hurt in that Warriors versus Raptors series. So the Warriors ended up winning 3 out of 5, and that could have even been more based off of expectations. The Warriors could have even won more. But people look at the Heat and the Warriors and like, yo, we could do what they did. We could go to 4 or 5 straight finals and win 2 or 3. But not everyone's going to be able to do that. And even the Clippers, we forget about the Clippers when they got Kawhi and Paul George. It wasn't really necessarily a super team. It was more of a dynamic duo type thing. But even going out and just, clearing out your roster to go get these superstars, because the Clippers had something. The Clippers and the Nets have actually a very similar situation now that I think about it. The Clippers were a team that no one expected to be good at first. Remember, they had to build that culture from scratch. They had Pat Beverly, they had Lou Williams, they had Montrezl Harrell, they had SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They had a really young, gritty team that, they built a culture. They had a young, gritty team and built a culture to a point where they made the playoffs, got to the AC, and even took the Warriors. They took a healthy Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant to 6 games. And we all looked at that Clippers team as like, and we were like, that team is going to be good going into the future. If they keep doing what they're doing. And they had did I mention Pat Beverly? Pat Beverly, Lou Williams, yeah, I mentioned all them. And we looked at that team and said, going into the future, if they keep doing what they're doing, that team's going to be scary. That team's going to be scary. And then we see the Clippers go and get KD and Kyrie. Not KD and Kyrie. I'm thinking of the Nets. We see the Clippers. They trade everything. They traded everything. They traded SGA. They traded picks. They traded everything to go get Paul George. Because if y'all remember, Kawhi wasn't coming to the Clippers without another star, which in hindsight, he should have just came and worked with those guys they had. But Kawhi came and he wouldn't come without another star. So the Clippers basically traded everything to get. They traded everything to OKC to get Paul George because they how they seen it is if I trade all these assets to go get Paul George, I'm basically trading for Paul George and Kawhi. Because if I get Paul George, I'm getting Kawhi. So, the Clippers ended up trading everything to get those guys, and the very next year in the bubble, they blow a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets. They were the championship favorites, and they ended up not even making the conference finals. They blew a 3-1 lead to Denver in the second round, which is crazy. It's crazy how that happens, bro. And then the next year, what was the next year? Did Kawhi tear his ACL that next year? Yeah, 2021. Kawhi tore his ACL in the second round, I believe. He tore his ACL in the second round, and then Paul George had to go play Phoenix by himself. Yeah, that's what happened. Kawhi tore his ACL in the playoffs the next year, and then Paul George had to go into the conference finals, and they took the Suns to 6 without Kawhi. And, it's crazy to think that if you got Kawhi, then you probably beat Phoenix, and you're probably going to win a championship. And that's where the injuries play a role. Injuries play a role with a lot of these superstars, really. Kawhi has always been more of an injury-prone type star, and, the Clippers don't, these teams don't really take into account when the stars are injury-prone. But yeah, the injuries ended up playing a part in their situation, and Kawhi gets hurt, and Kawhi wasn't there for all of this year. He didn't play none of this year due to his ACL tear. But you see with the Clippers, you think about what could have been if they would have kept a SGA, if they would have kept Pat Beverly, if they would have kept Montrez, if they would have kept those picks, what they could have built going into the future. You start thinking about things like that. And same with Brooklyn. Remember when Brooklyn had that team in 2019, both teams had these really good young cores with a good culture. They built good cultures with good coaching. Kenny Atkinson was a good coach with Brooklyn. They go ahead and fire him for Steve Nash because that's who KD and Kyrie wanted. KD and Kyrie wanted Steve Nash, and now we're starting to see how that's turning out. But anyways, I'm starting to get off track. The Nets had that good young team with Dinwiddie. They had Jarrett Allen. They had D'Angelo Russell. They had Karis LeVert. Then Kenny Atkinson coaching that team and, helping them develop. And the Nets and Sean Marks, the Nets GM Sean Marks, he did an amazing job building that team, especially considering that he came into that team with the Nets having no picks, no young core. The Nets were done. No, they were in purgatory. No one knew what they were going to do going into the future because they had no assets. They had nothing. And Sean Marks comes into that team and he starts building it from scratch. He starts getting some picks in there. He starts getting some young guys in there. And it's crazy to think that they went from having that good young core and having with good coaching and good culture to bringing in these 2 max contract superstars. They basically get rid of everything just to bring in those guys. They bring in KD and Kyrie, and KD and Kyrie now they control that franchise. Sean Marks doesn't have as big of an impact as he did before because if KD and Kyrie want something, they're gonna get it. KD and Kyrie wanted Steve Nash, they got it. KD and Kyrie wanted, some of those role players that they have, they got it. KD and Kyrie wanted to play this ISO ball system, and they got it. And, the Nets, in attempt at building a super team, they go out and they see James Harden is disgruntled. James Harden is disgruntled. He wants out of Houston, right? So they trade even more. They get rid of even more young assets. They get rid of Jarrett Allen and Karis LeVert, and they bring in James Harden. And it's like, okay, the Nets have 3 dynamic scorers, 3 of the most talented scorers of all time. But how is this gonna fit? How is this gonna fit? And James Harden ends up playing that point guard role for that team, and Kyrie ends up playing the 2 guard. KD still does what he does. And it was working. It was working until you see Kyrie. He's super unreliable, and we know that now. And we knew that then. But Kyrie ends up not playing most of the time. KD gets hurt. Harden gets hurt. KD got hurt into the end of not into the playoffs. He was healthy going into the playoffs, but Harden got hurt. Kyrie, and Harden got hurt, and they didn't have any role players to really help KD at that point because they traded all of them. They got rid of all of them to create this super team, and the Nets lose to the Bucks in 7, but they didn't have their two star. Well, Harden played, but he wasn't himself, and they didn't have Kyrie. And you start to think, like, what if the Nets would have just kept that young core? What if they would have kept that young core with Dinwiddie and those boys, and D'Angelo Russell, Caris LeVert and those boys? And because those guys are all flourishing on their respective teams. Jarrett Allen became an all-star with the Cavs. D'Angelo Russell, they're in the fight with the Grizzlies right now in the first round. He's doing good in Minnesota. Caris LeVert was doing good in Indiana. You got all these guys who are doing good on their respective teams. What could have been if you would have kept those guys and kept your picks? Because y'all can't forget, the Nets did for the second time had to trade all of their picks. Also, they traded their young core and all of their picks to get this current Brooklyn team. And even with James Harden ended up being unhappy. He ended up being unhappy because of the bad relationship with Kyrie, all the drama, all the injuries. No one's ever there. They never got their guys all together. And James Harden ends up getting unhappy. He ends up requesting a trade. And they trade him to Philly for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and I believe they got a couple picks out of it too. And they did that trade. Ben Simmons doesn't end up playing for the rest of the year. They end up getting swept in the first round. The Brooklyn Nets, who were intending to build a super team, they end up getting swept in the first round. So you start to think, it's like, okay, we got these superstar guys. We did what they wanted. We were playing the system they wanted. We got the coach they wanted. But what are we getting out of it? We haven't even gotten out the first. They got out the first round last year, but they haven't even gotten to a conference championship. They haven't even gotten to an NBA Finals yet, and it's been 3 years. We're going into the 4th year of this. At least the Lakers got a championship out of there. When they traded for AD, they got a championship out of it. So, even though the Lakers had a bad year this year, they missed the playoffs with a so-called super team. They at least got a ring out of LeBron and AD. The Nets ain't get anything out of it in attempt at building a super team. And the Clippers, in attempt at getting their 2 stars, didn't win anything either. Because it's like you can't just trade all of your young core and all of your picks and then be like, okay, we got the super team, guaranteed ring. It doesn't work that way. And it makes you appreciate teams like the Golden State Warriors, who, before they got KD, all of their talent was homegrown and drafted. They drafted Steph Curry. They drafted Klay Thompson. They drafted Draymond Green. All of their core that's still there to this day, still contending for championships to this day, were all drafted and developed. Same with Memphis. Y'all see even though Memphis doesn't look so good in their first round series right now, Memphis was irrelevant a year or two ago. They were super irrelevant. That team, that franchise, we had no hope for Memphis after Mike Conley and Marc Gasol and those guys end up either retiring or going to new teams. There was really no hope for Memphis. But they go ahead and draft Ja. They draft Desmond Bane. They draft Jaren Jackson Jr. They draft Dylan Brooks. All those guys that they drafted, and then they did some good free agent signings like Steven Adams, who's out right now for them, but Steven Adams was a really good free agent signing. And, they did things to develop. They drafted those guys and then developed them to the point where they're a second seed right now. And some people think they may be, contenders. So that's my thing. That's my thing with super teams is like, bro, honestly, what we're seeing in today's NBA, you rather draft and develop your guys. And so, they have that loyalty to your team. They have the chemistry. They're familiar with everything. And you don't have to worry about egos as much because those guys grew up together in the NBA and they all learned to work with each other. And I don't know, man. I don't know, man. Super teams, they're done. They're done. You're most likely not gonna win with the super team. And you forget last year's champions, the Bucks. The Bucks aren't a super team. The Bucks drafted Giannis. The Bucks drafted Middleton. Well, the Pistons drafted Middleton, and they got Middleton in the draft. Let's just say that they got Middleton in the draft. The only free agent signing that they really had was Drew Holiday, but that's after they got their drafted and homegrown talent, and then they go win a championship that way. Toronto, even though they won mostly because the Warriors got hurt, but Toronto won the championship because they drafted all their guys. They drafted Kyle, they drafted DeMar, they drafted Siakam, and they got Van Fleet after him. He didn't get drafted, but they got him off the undrafted free agent market. And they fall short a few years. They fell short to the Cavs so many times with DeMar's super inconsistent playoff performances, and Kyle had some inconsistent playoff performances. And they end up being able to trade a guy that they drafted, a homegrown talent. They drafted DeMar to the Spurs for Kawhi, and then they end up winning a championship with Kawhi. And they didn't have to give up too much to get Kawhi because they already had an all-star that could instantly, perform for the Spurs. So, Toronto, they end up trading their homegrown and drafted talent to go get a star. And they didn't create a super team, but they created a really gritty, tough defensive team who can score and who can perform in the playoffs, and they go win a championship. They ended up winning a championship, which, none of us would have expected the Raptors to be champions the year before because, they didn't really have a role to that happening. All they really did was to go get a disgruntled superstar with, them being disgruntled with their all-star. It was a swap, basically a swap, and they go win a championship. So, yeah, super teams don't look like it's going to be the way going forward, especially after this year. But we're going to go ahead and get into the East. The Bucks, they end up, after they end up beating the Bulls, they ended up closing out the Bulls. They're going to end up playing Boston in the second round, and I want to just give y'all my preview and my prediction to that series. And first and foremost, I have the Bucks in 7. I have the Bucks barely squeezing out in 7. And this is going to be my second time. It's going to be my second time going against the Celtics because I went against Boston in the first round. I thought Brooklyn was going to beat them in 7. And y'all see how that ended up turning out. I was completely wrong. But in this series, I'm going to go against them again. I'm going to go Bucks in 7. Reason being is my confidence in Giannis is I have so much confidence in Giannis, bro. I believe that Giannis is the best player in the world, and he continues to prove and show why he's the best player in the world. And in this series, he's going to be a lot more aggressive than he was in the Bulls series. In the Bulls series, he didn't have to be as aggressive because, his role players showed up and he didn't have to do as much. But in this series, especially with Middleton being out, it just came out. Let me get the exact tweet. Middleton's going to be out for the whole second round. Middleton's going to miss the whole second round with that MCL sprain, bro. Yeah, he's going to miss the whole second round with that MCL sprain. So most people would have the Celtics in 6 or 7, but the reason why I choose the Bucks again is because I believe so much in Giannis. And even in my belief mostly stems from the finals from last year. Last year, the Suns were supposed to beat the Bucks, bro. The Suns were the favorites. The Suns were the better team. But Giannis was, he willed his team to a championship because he's that good. He ended up having that 50-point, I believe it was a 50-point, 16 rebound, 5 blocks in Game 6. And he willed his team to a championship. And I believe he's going to do that this series. He's going to will his team past the second round versus Boston. I also think that the Bucks, with their championship pedigree and that championship experience from last year, even if Giannis dominates, the role players are going to end up doing enough to where they're experienced enough in those situations to know how to get past Boston or do certain things that Boston throws. You're going to know how to counter certain things that Boston throws at them. But the thing with the Celtics, bro, is I wouldn't be surprised if they were to win this series. If they won the series in 6, I wouldn't be surprised with that defense. And then they got the coaching, the elite coaching. They got the reliable role players. And then they got the 2 stars. Is it with the cherry on top is the 2 stars with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And in round 1, they showed that they can beat anyone. The Celtics can beat anyone. That's why I'm choosing the Bucks in 7. Even without Middleton, I believe so much in Giannis and that championship pedigree that I'm going to choose the Bucks in 7. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Celtics won this series. I wouldn't be surprised if the Celtics beat anyone. If the Celtics beat Miami, I wouldn't be surprised. If they end up making the finals, I wouldn't be surprised, because it's like, bro, they've proven that they're real. And I told y'all that in, I believe, an episode or 2. It was the last podcast episode. I told y'all, bro, the Celtics are for real. They're real championship contenders, and I'm sure we all see that by now. So I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest sense if they were to win this series. The Bucks will have problems without Middleton. To be honest with you guys, I would have chose the Bucks in 6 if they had Middleton, but I believe they're going to struggle a little bit when he's not going to always be able to get his, especially versus this Boston defense. I don't think they can stop him. I don't think they have a chance of stopping him, but I do think they can slow him down, and to a point where, like, whenever the Celtics are they can make a run while slowing Giannis down for 2 or 3 minutes at a time because of that elite defense and that elite coaching. And they make adjustments. Let's say Giannis has a 15-point first quarter or a 20-point first quarter, the Celtics will make adjustments to a point where he's not going to do that in the second, third, or fourth, because they see what he's doing. They're like, nah, we're not letting you beat us. We're going to let everyone else beat us. And I think they're going to come into that series with that mentality. Like, Giannis is not going to beat us. Y'all role players going to have to beat us. And they're going to come into that. They're going to be more confident with that game plan because Middleton's not going to be there. Because Middleton is a guy that if he gets hot, he can beat you. Middleton can win a playoff game or 2 if he gets hot. So when it comes to that, bro, the Bucks are going to have to get some of those role players going, like they did versus the Bulls. The Bulls, they had Grayson Allen, they had Jrue Holiday, they had Bobby Portis doing his thing. Brook Lopez, he's gonna have to do his thing. The role players are gonna have to come along, because we all know Giannis is gonna get his. Giannis is gonna get his no matter what Boston does. But when the Celtics start making those runs and when the Celtics start making those adjustments against Giannis, what's Grayson Allen going to do? What's Jrue Holiday going to do? They're going to have to come along with Giannis if they're going to win this series, which I believe they will do, because they have that championship pedigree that they got from last year. That experience they got from last year is going to help them this year, for sure. For sure. But the sad thing to say about this series, bro, is one of these teams is going to get eliminated in the second round, bro. One of these teams is going to be out in the second round, which is obvious, but it's like both teams are championship contenders. And for one of these teams to lose in the second round, it's going to be crazy, bro. It's going to be crazy. I believe if the Bucks end up losing, they're not going to make any changes. They're going to make little to no changes, because it's like they've won a championship with this core and they know what they can do. They already know what they can do, or what they're capable of with this core. I believe Boston, they might be forced to make some changes, because they made the conference finals in 2020, but other than that, they had disappointing playoff after playoff. They had disappointing times, playoffs after playoffs. So, this is going to be interesting to see how this series ends up playing out and what happens playing out after this series with both teams. But yeah, man, that's what I got for that series. That's my predictions for that series. Bucks in 7, even without Middleton. Bucks in 7. But I want to touch on something that I seen yesterday on Twitter. I'm pretty sure most of y'all seen it already. Doc Rivers, he started making excuses because a reporter basically asked him, like, yo, you're blowing a 3-0 series lead right now. It's 3-2 right now, and you're going back to Toronto to play game 6. Does any of the previous playoff experiences with blowing 3-1 leads or playoff disappointments, does any of that play? Do you ever think about that when, going into the series and going into trying to close out the series? And he basically started ranting. He started ranting like, "Oh, if we're gonna talk about my playoff disappointments, let's tell the full story." And it's like, and then he goes, "Let's tell the full story. Oh, you guys don't ever give me credit for getting that Orlando team to the point where they were at. You guys talk about the Clippers, but Chris Paul was out, and this, down, the third." Like, he was making excuses, bro. And I'm like, okay. The first thing that I took away from that is that Doc Rivers is starting to crack under pressure. He's starting to feel that pressure, like, dang, bro, if I end up blowing this lead, this is going to be bad. If he loses his series and blows a 3-0 lead, this is going to be bad. This is going to be probably the worst thing that you could throw into his resume. But it's not going to be a one-time situation. This is going to be piling on to multiple situations. He's blown a 3-1 lead in Orlando. He's blown a 3-1 lead in LA. He's blown a 3-1 lead in he blew a 3-1 lead in LA twice. He blew a 3-1 lead in LA twice. I just thought about that. It was two different Clippers teams, but they were both on the Clippers. The first one was with CP3 and those boys, and the second one was with Kawhi and Paul George. So he's starting to crack under pressure because he's starting to see, like, okay, I have to win this series. And he's starting to fold because it's like, he's starting to fold when the reporter asks him, because he knows, bro. He knows. Doc Rivers knows. And I told y'all yesterday, or the day before that Doc Rivers is one of the most overrated coaches of all time. He's one of the most overrated coaches of all time. And not because he's not a good coach. And I don't think he's a bad coach. I don't think he's a bad coach. I don't think he's a good coach. But I believe that the media puts him on this pedestal like, oh, Doc Rivers is a championship coach. Doc Rivers can get you, if you need a coach to, get you over the hump, you hire Doc Rivers. And Doc Rivers has consistently proven that, no, he's not that guy. He's not that guy. And he knows he's not that guy. I think he knows that. But he's just trying to, deflect when it came to the reporter asking him that type of question, because he's starting to feel it. He feels it. He feels the pressure, bro. And when it came to all those blown 3-1 leads, he was the biggest culprit. I can't really speak on the Orlando series too much. I was too young. I couldn't watch it. I never watched that series when they played Detroit. But I can reflect when they play. I can reflect on when they played Houston, and it was Josh Smith. Josh Smith was on the Rockets. It was Josh Smith. It was Dwight. And James Harden was on that team, but James Harden didn't really play too much of an impact when it came to Houston coming back from 3-1. It was really Dwight, Josh Smith, and Luka Mbamute out of all people. It was those three guys out of all people. And the Clippers... They were dominating that series, bro. They were up 3-1, dominating. It didn't look close. That was the best year of the Clippers. That was the best chance of the Clippers winning a championship, was that year in 2015. And they blew it. They blew it to role players. And that you can't really blame that on the guys on the court, because your coach needs to make adjustment. He needs to make adjustments. You can give them some of the blame. Like, you can give Chris Paul 5%, Blake Griffin 10%, DeAndre 5%, whatever the case may be. But you, as a head coach, and especially on the professional level, on the NBA level, you have to be able to make the requisite, adjustments to be able to close out that series, especially against role players. You didn't lose to James Harden. James Harden was not the reason y'all lost that series. It was the role players. You couldn't make adjustments on role players, bro. You couldn't make adjustments on role players. And the next series with Kawhi and Paul George, you lose to Denver in the bubble, and it's like, bro, how did you lose that series? How do you let Jamal Murray go off the way he did? Jamal Murray did have a amazing postseason, not taking anything away from Jamal Murray, but y'all let that man kill y'all. Luka killed y'all in the series before that. Luka killed y'all. Jamal Murray killed y'all. And you with two superstar, amazing defensive players like Paul George and Kawhi, you can't make the adjustments to be able to close out that series, bro. You've blown it, bro. Doc Rivers has blown it multiple times, and it looks like he's blowing it again. If they lose Game 6 in Toronto, this is he's gonna have to answer for that. Even if they win Game 7, he's gonna have to answer for blowing the 3-0 lead, bro. That will be crazy. You blew 3 different 3-1 leads before that, and then you're gonna blow a 3-0 lead after that? Nah, bro. You gotta answer. You got questions to answer. You're gonna have a lot of people to answer to after that. And even with this series going the way it goes, even if they win, now we know Philly's not going deep. Philly's not winning the championship this year. Philly's not going to the conference finals this year. So we could put that to bed. We could put that to bed right now, to be honest with y'all. But yeah, man, that's all I got for Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers, one of the most overrated coaches of all time, and you know he can't handle the pressure right now. He can't handle the pressure. He's starting to feel it. He knows, bro. He knows he's not that guy. But yeah, man, that's all I got for y'all when it comes to my topics for today. But you know, let's go ahead and get into the predictions for today's playoff games. And we just got done talking about Doc Rivers, but and the fact that he can't lose this game, he can't lose this series. But I actually have him losing the game, believe it or not. I got the Raptors winning at home to force a Game 7. They're going to force a Game 7, bro. They have all the momentum on their side right now, and you know Philly has all the pressure right now. The Raptors have the best situation or the best circumstances to be able to go into this series with no pressure, go into this game with no pressure and have no expectations. The Raptors have no expectations of winning this series right now. They're just hooping right now. And so I believe that, you know, going with that coming into effect, and then they got all the momentum, bro. I got the Raptors winning Game 6 and forcing a Game 7. They're going back to Philly for Game 7. I'm telling y'all that right now. You got the Pelicans playing in Phoenix. Oh no, the Pelicans are at home. It's Game 6. Game 6, the Pelicans at home. And I got another surprising prediction. I got the Pelicans winning Game 6 at home, and they also going to Game 7. They're going to force a Game 7 in Phoenix. They've proven that they can match up with the Suns. I think that they've proven they can match up with the Suns, especially without Devin Booker. And they're going to make it scary for them. They're going to give them a scare. I don't think they're going to win the series still. I think the Suns are going to win it in 7. But the Pelicans are going to win Game 6 and force a Game 7. They're going to force a Game 7. They've proven they can match up with them. And even if they lose this game, it's going to be competitive. It's going to be extremely competitive. They're not going to lay down. They're going to have like a Denver Nuggets type game to where they're not just going to get closed out easily, especially at home. So I got the Pelicans winning this one and forcing a Game 7. And then Dallas versus Utah, I actually got Dallas closing it out. They're going to close it out today. I've said every bad, negative thing there is to say about Utah. I don't have much to say about them, to be honest with you. You know, Luka, he's the best player on the court. He's going to end up dropping 30 and 8 assists. He's going to drop like 38 and 7, I'm going to say. And he's going to end up having an amazing superstar caliber game. And, you know, he's going to close them out. And they're going to go on to play... Who would they play? They will play the winner of Pelicans and Suns. So, they're going to advance to round 2. And they're going to wait for the winner of the Pelicans and the Suns, man. So, yeah, that's it for my predictions. We're going to see what happens tonight. Y'all, you know, continue to support me. Subscribe, like from whatever platform you're listening to, whether that's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever platform you may be listening to me from. Just go ahead and continue to support, like, you know, subscribe, comment, whatever you can do from whichever platform you're listening to me from. Y'all continue to look out for that LA Lakers offseason breakdown. I just dropped the Houston Rockets offseason breakdown on the YouTube channel, which y'all could go watch right now. It's posted right now. And y'all look out for that Lakers offseason breakdown. That's in the works right now. So I'm cooking that up for y'all right now. And, you know, look out for tomorrow's episode. Tomorrow I'm gonna be on here also. So but that's it for me. That's it for your boy Armani, and I'm out. Peace.